building their case. Today, the prosecution calling victims and first responders to the stand in the Boston Marathon bombing trial. The jury also saying this video from inside the Marathon sports store on Boylston Street just seconds after that deadly blast went off. The manager of that store detailing how he helped what happened on that fateful day. Hello, everyone. I'm Ty Hernandez in New York. Defense attorneys had tried to block the testimony of victims given at this stage of the trial, but the judge overruled them. And following this trial from inside the courtroom for us, ABC's Aaron Kutersky. Prosecution building its case. What did you hear in court?
Well, on day two, Ty, the defense tried from the outset to limit some of the graphic, rather visceral testimony that we've heard here, but it continued here on day two. Right at the scene of the first explosion, a police officer talked about the powdery smell that he encountered and talked about seeing blood and limbs. A man named Jeff Bauman testified about what he saw, and that was Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. He said that he bumped into him and noticed him because he didn't look like anybody else that had been on scene that day. Everybody, he said, was having a good time, but the man he later came to learn as Dzhokhar Tsarnaev looked very serious, and he later from his hospital bed described to the FBI a man in aviator sunglasses, a guy about 6'3", in a dark jacket and hoodie and a dark baseball cap pulled down low, and the public would soon see the image that was beamed all over of a man in a black hat and his younger brother Dzhokhar, the man in the white hat. That younger brother is now sitting in court. Very tough to tell how he's taking all this testimony, Ty. He betrays no particular emotion, a rather flat demeanor today.
So day two of the trial, the first full day of testimony, what was the mood like in that courtroom listening to what these victims had to say?
Well, today's testimony has taken jurors right to the scene of the second explosion, and that's the explosion that even the defense has conceded Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was responsible for. That was the one right in front of the Forum restaurant, which, by the way, has since closed, but it was open on Boylston Street, full of people, as it customarily was on Marathon Monday. And among those in front of that restaurant was Rosanne Stoya. She came to court on a prosthetic leg. She said she now has to use a microprocessor to move her right leg for her, and she talked through tears about learning to walk again and about the difficult decision the doctor made to amputate above the knee. Her testimony was very difficult to listen to talk about her injuries, and it was accompanied again by graphic photographs of those very injuries. She had been lifted off Boylston Street by a college student, a 22-year-old, and you could see in the photograph her bloodied leg severely twisted. Difficult for jurors and anyone in that courtroom to see. Then she talked about instructing the college student to put her down on the pavement because she said she thought she was going to pass out. And at that point, others tied a belt around her leg as a tourniquet before she was finally taken over to the hospital. These witnesses have, one after the other, been giving the jury a vivid description of the impact of the blast. And Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's defense attorney said this is really more appropriate for later on in the penalty phase. But the judge has allowed this testimony to continue, and we expect yet more of it as the day goes on.
At this point, it's pretty clear the prosecution, rather than begin with the evidence against Tsarnaev, has chosen to paint a picture in that courtroom of what it was like that day. And it sounds like it's been pretty effective so far, given those types of details you've shared with us.
From what you can tell, the jury is captivated by all of this testimony, and they have been snapped right back to the moment nearly 2 years ago, not far from this courthouse, where all of this unfolded. And it has given them a very rather stunning and oftentimes emotional picture, just a gripping account of what it was like to be in that scene. One after the other, we have heard stories of how people came to the marathon, who they were watching. For one man, it was his girlfriend. For someone else, it was her mother-in-law. But they were all there, as so many were on Patriots Day in Boston. They've been running this race for 118 years. And the jury has now understood the importance not only of the day, the size of the crowd. They've seen pictures of how densely packed the sidewalk along Boylston Street was. And the prosecutor's message has been that this was a particularly insidious terrorist attack that hit innocent people when they were least expecting it. Some of those who testified today, Ty, said that this is such a festive atmosphere. At first, they couldn't believe that there would be celebratory cannons because they hadn't seen those before. Then they come to find out that these were bombs concealed in backpacks, fashioned from pressure cookers that maimed more than 260 people. And the parade of these witnesses is likely to continue. We did get a bit of a break when a couple of FBI agents took to the stand to describe some of the evidence that they had collected. A bit later on, we expect them to show the jury, the prosecutors to show the jury some of that evidence as they continue to lay out the case against Dzhokhar Tsarnaev.
You mentioned Tsarnaev not showing much emotion, and I know it can be difficult depending on where you are seated in that courtroom. Could you tell if he was looking directly at the witnesses? Is he, give us a few more details about how he's conducting himself through these proceedings.
Oftentimes, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev appears to slouch at the defense table, and it's difficult to see whether he actually makes eye contact with the witnesses. We spoke to one who had testified yesterday, Rebecca Gregory of Texas, a woman with long blonde hair, sat at the defense table, and she said she made a point of trying to look down at Dzhokhar Tsarnaev from the witness stand, stare him down so she wouldn't be afraid anymore. And she wrote a rather stunning Facebook account after her testimony to say that she came to court fearful of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. He was, after all, the man who she believed took her leg from her by planting that backpack bomb right near her feet. But after she testified and after she stared him down, she said she came to learn that he was a coward. And in his diminished state now as a federal defendant, sitting in a courtroom, she said she was no longer fearful of that man.
ABC's Aaron Katersky, thank you so much for joining us with details from inside that courtroom in Boston. You can keep up with this story in real time by downloading the ABC News app and starring this story for exclusive updates on the go. I'm Ty Hernandez in New York.